readers,
reviewers,
countrymen,
lend us your ears. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreons.
Thank you to the Pit Fighters, the First Swords, and all of the Bright Stars, Truth and Courage.
Hello and welcome to the video today. We are the Brothers Gwynne and we are going to be talking about our favourite fantasy books of all time. Every single fantasy book we've read. I think last time I added it up, I think there was 530 fantasy books that we have read. Some obviously cross over, but that amount of books boiled down to a list of today our first, second, third and fourth favourites of all time. Plus, you know, some honourable mentions just for a bit of cheating's sake. If you haven't watched part one of our video talking from the beginning of the top 10, then please, you can go watch that before you see the very, very favourites. And if you have, please...
Is it up there?
Yeah, it will be.
Nice.
Well done,
Thank
Eddie.
you.
Knows what corner it appears now. And if you've got any predictions on what is going to be in this video, please put them. Of course, it's only fantasy. It doesn't matter if it's historical fantasy. We'd still include that.
Yes.
As long as it is fantastical, then it will be in this video. But Ed, it's enough waffling. Although we do a lot of that, and we probably will be going on more tangents in this video. Please kick it off, but don't damage the book with your fourth favourite fantasy read of all time.
It's a good list. It's been exciting. And what I love about this list is that Will and I have realised how we love very similar authors. We love the same authors, but we look for different things in those authors' books. And we have chosen slightly similar choices. But I have a book here for number 4 that I have a feeling would have been in your top 10 fantasy of all time had you read it in time to do these videos.
Well, I'm as intrigued as anyone right now.
It's The Daughter's War by Christopher Buehlman. I don't know how you can read this and then say it's not in your best fantasy books of all time, because this book is everything that makes fantasy engaging, exciting, full of vivid characters, insane lore and world building. The magical creatures is phenomenal, and this will make you terrified of goblins, unlike anything else in the world. The Daughter's War is a prequel to The Black Tongue Thief, and we follow Galva, who is a young Corvid Raven Knight, and it is during the Goblin Wars, and we are following Galva as she has associations with her various brothers who are in the military as well. They have sailed over to the Goblin lands, and they are in a full, kind of Apocalypse Now-esque war against the goblins. And it is horrifying. Christopher Buehlman writes in such a unique, explosive way. And to me, he is the newest addition into my pantheon of greats. Because I've read this, and I also read Between Two Fires back to back last month. And I just cannot stop thinking about both of them. Both of them are equally as good. I chose not to choose Between Two Fires for this list because it is more historical, even though it is historical fantasy. I chose not to have it, really. I'll have it in my historical fiction list, I would say.
So it's more
I've
historical.
made the distinction for me.
Fantasy.
Yeah, but there is some cool fantasy stuff in it. But so The Daughter's War, we follow Galva, who is just such a great character to read from. She's this stoic young warrior, and what I love about her is that she plays the role of looking after these great big corvids who are used in the Goblin Wars. There are no horses left. So immediately we're going to have this emotional connection.
How did he make me love ostriches with raven beaks, basically?
Giant ostriches.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but he did it because you have such a connection to these animals. And they are essentially the dogs of this world, aren't they? Because we love dogs. I mean, if you
they are Galva's best friends.
Exactly. And the writing in this is just incredible. The prose is fantastic. It's so layered, and it sometimes does take the world in tangents, but it feels incredibly real. And those tangents kind of just add this colour to the world.
Yeah.
You feel actual terror when you read about these goblins. Like they give me a physical sensation. It's like my skin's itchy, and
these are not your normal goblins.
No, they're not. And I mean, the medieval style warfare here is unlike any fantasy book I've read. I mean, say maybe perhaps like Miles Cameron's series, The Red Knight. I know that Christopher Buehlman worked a little bit with Christian Cameron, writing about medieval warfare, but he takes it in such a unique direction that applies to fantasy. It's just brilliant. The Daughters War is amazing. Go read it. It's not very similar to The Black Tongue Thief in the way that the prose is so different, because he tailors it to Galva, and she's a far different character to Kinch. So yes,
and
I love it.
When we recorded part 1, I was only halfway through this book, and having sat down for video 2, I've now finished it, and as Ed said, he's completely right. This would be in my list. It's probably my 5th or 6th favourite fantasy book of all time. This is, or it should be, launched into the top echelons of literature. Forget just fantasy, any genre, this needs the highest respect and regard, in my opinion. The way it's written, the most incredible prose amongst that I've ever written. I put it like Cormac McCarthy level, like how incredible it is. The creativity on how he finds ways around these plot devices and the story and the evolution and how to unveil certain secrets and hide others is just masterful. You're terrified of the creatures.
And I also need to say that I think modern contemporary fantasy has moved away from having a really good bad guy. But there's a character here you don't expect to be a bad guy, and then they are so hateable. They remind me of Felix from the Wolf Den trilogy.
Don't remind me of my
He is despicable, and Christopher Bjornman just makes you feel that it's such an evocative book that you really do feel every ounce of grief, anger, fear, excitement that Galva feels throughout this book. And I think that's just another reason why it's so good. The bad guy is written to perfection, and we need more of that in fantasy.
Wonderfully said, Ed. And this is a standalone, and this is what, in my mind, modern epic fantasy should be. It's got that grit, it's got what we love in the modern day, that sense of realism and kind of relatability, but it's got an epic backdrop within an intimate story, and it is just wonderful, and that's not just recency bias. So that's your number 4,
It's just
Ed.
exciting, that book
And
to read.
I kind of stole your number 4
You've
as well.
slyly, sly fox, you sleeky fox, you've chosen 15 books.
Yeah, I have.
Wow. Okay.
Or 14, but yeah. My number 4, though, is The Silmarillion by Tolkien. So, of course, we couldn't include all the words way.
Christopher Bjornman with The Silmarillion.
Let's not upset me. When I think about kind of my favourite Tolkien works, if I included The Lord of the Rings as a series, I'd be talking about that. But when I think about what are my favourite moments in Middle-earth, so many are from The Silmarillion, and it made me cry about 7 times. Ed, I might have to stop the camera and fight you if you carry on, and we don't want that.
Would you shout to Arthur Dayton? No, what did they say? And he said Tuatha De... what's
Tuatha De Danann?
What does he shout in? Yeah, no, I know that. What does he
men.
shout in The Silmarillion when he kills the Balrogs or the trolls? Who is it?
They Shall Come Again.
Yeah, that's it. What is it in Elvish? See, I can't remember it either. What is it?
It's been a long day, Ed. It's been a long day. Well, we've consulted Papa Gwyn, and it's Aure Enterluva. Why? How could I forget that? And I'll probably pronounce it wrong, but...
Aure Enterluva.
Perfect, Ed.
Thank
well
you.
done.
Yeah.
But The Silmarillion has got so many
Tuatha De Danann.
incredible moments, and I do agree it's quite hard to get into it at the beginning. But I've read this 4 times.
At the end.
Ed, one more moment of disrespect.
Sorry.
I just can't wait until there's a book later on, which I can dig into.
You promised you wouldn't.
But you said the same to me.
Okay.
And it seems promises are made to be broken in your eyes. The Silmarillion moves me to tears, and it is just the most wonderful exploration of building a world in my eyes. The depth is unrivaled. Even A Song of Ice and Fire, I don't think, doesn't reach the depth of what Tolkien created in his lifetime. And I just absolutely adore it from beginning to end, and it moves me, as I said, probably to tears more than any other book. The amount of occasions I'm talking about.
What?
There's other books where there's a moment that's made me cry more, but I think there's like 4 or 5 moments I cry at.
I watched you read The Farseer.
Yeah, there's one
Realm of the
moment.
Elderlings.
There's one moment that I actually sobbed in Farseer. I sobbed. Actually, maybe 2. Maybe 3, but they were in different books.
You cried more in The Silmarillion.
I'm saying in one book, there's 4 or 5 different moments that I cry at.
Wow.
Where
You should read more.
I say Papa Grimm books, I think I've cried at the end of every book.
Yeah.
And the Farseer, or The Realm of the Eldlings, I've cried in quite a few of the books, but none of the books I've cried at 4 or 5 different moments. But anyway, we've dwelt on that too long. Now on to number 3.
How can I have a best fantasy list without mentioning Abercrombie? Now, The Last Argument of Kings is my 3rd favourite fantasy book of all time. I actually finished listening to it for the 7th time yesterday. I love this series so much. The First Law to me is, I think, like the pinnacle of grimdark fantasy. It is such a great character study, and that's really, I think, what it is at its heart. But not only is it a great character study, it's hilarious. The action is incredible. The Last Argument of Kings takes the series from, I imagine, back in the day. I mean, when I say back in the day, when it was released, like, I don't know, like 12, 13, 14 years ago, as being that era of fantasy was slightly different to the era that we're in now, where it was taking this almost conventional style of story and it completely pulled the rug from underneath its carpet. I mean, the dialogue is just so witty. The characters take themselves in directions that you're like, what the hell did they just do? Logan Ninefingers is one of my favourite characters of all time. I don't think I actually go a day without thinking about Logan. And I've actually had my classes in history, telling and saying Logan Ninefingers quotes, which is funny. Not all of them, and but some of them apply just to life. Logan's father was a wise man.
Can never have too many knives.
I think this book might have some, let's say, weaker areas because there are 2 characters, or 3 main POVs who don't really do too much compared to the other books. But there's one POV who he stands head and shoulders above the rest.
I think he's just so good. He makes the others.
You literally allow everything else
incredible
because of these moments. And I won't lie, I cried twice at Last Argument of Kings. It was, even though I never expected to, because you think of Joe Abercrombie's writing, people don't usually say emotional, but to me, I do have an emotional connection to particularly one of these characters. And there are several moments with him that just spark pure emotion within me, and that's
I know there's one line near the end that we both cried out.
Oh, exactly, and it that's what I'm looking for in a fantasy book, in a book, regardless, that I have this emotional connection to these characters, and something as simple as one compliment, which is in this book, it just completely catches you off guard. It does. You find that there's a giant frog in your throat, and the only thing that can kill it,
the tiny bit of heart,
is blacked out. But I mean, this is hilarious. This book as well. It has such funny moments. There are some characters that go down in the greats of all time in the fantasy halls of Valhalla, and the Last Argument of Kings, Joe Abercrombie. Some of his best writing is here, and The First Law, I think, is definitely my favourite series that isn't written by Papa Gwynne. So yeah.
Quick question: would you recommend listening for the first time, consuming it audiobook or physically? The first series.
I would personally do what I did, which is physically read them first and then go back straight away and listen to them again.
Perfect.
Because knowing these characters and then listening to it, I don't know, because maybe if you listen to it, then you read it with those characters' voices in your head, which is great as well. Particularly Glockter's voice.
I've never listened to them, so I will be. I think in 2025 I'll be doing a reread.
They're the best audiobooks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. And now on to my number 3. Talking about heartbreaking books earlier.
Oh no.
I've got Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. The second book of the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. This book, it just speaks to kind of the humanity. That sounds really heavy and really deep.
It speaks to humanity.
I think because there's been so many books following a similar cast of characters, from a Bildungsroman coming of age story originally, into older age with some of these characters are now parents entering a new phase of their life. Some of them,
What would the Fool call his son?
Ed. Let's not have
Fool Junior.
But Fool Junior. But because of that, you feel so attached to these characters, and through just the genius of Robin Hobb, who is just one of the greatest writers of all time, is maybe not your typical epic fantasy writer, but if you're talking about character creation, character craft, understanding kind of what makes people tick, what makes them human, and showing those flaws as well as virtues on the page, she's almost unbeatable.
The relationships through dialogue and what's left unsaid is usually like it feels like a Shane Meadows book, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Through just reading the way that a character moves in a conversation, it tells so much.
Yeah. And sadly, there's still a lot of snobbery in the general world about fantasy, isn't there? But I think if there wasn't...
they are all...
fools. Nice said. If this wasn't fantasy and it was just looked at objectively without that snobbery or looking down on it, Robin Hobb, I just feel convinced, would be hailed as one of the greatest writers of all time.
Yeah.
And it's a shame she isn't, but at least I know that she is. So at least I've been enlightened, and many other people who aren't snobs do as well. Of course, no book is for everyone. So there's a lot of people who Robin the Owlings doesn't click with, but luckily I'm in the camp where it just not only does it click.
Lot of people where it clicks like twice.
Yeah, not only does it click open, the door flies off the hinges for me. So that's Fool's Quest. I was trying to do a bit of a U-word, really engaging and, pushing those metaphors to the boundaries. Yeah. But that's my third favourite because it engages me on such a different level to basically everything else I read. And that is because of how much of a commitment this series is. But I loved it from beginning to end and I just love it. Mm-hmm. And this is the only book that I have cried with happiness. Cried in joy. No, this is the only book ever. There's a moment you've been waiting for, and it happens, and oh my gosh, I didn't think I could cry in happiness at a book, but I did.
I cried in happiness in Valor.
Did you?
Yeah, where certain animals meet each other.
Yeah,
again.
That's
and they lick you.
I actually, obviously, I can't say the names for spoilers, but for those who know the Folk and the Fallen and that, just want to say when you read that to Mama Gwynne, I remember her sobbing just on the kitchen table.
Yeah.
Out of context from the rest of the book.
Yeah.
But anyway, enough about spoilers that nobody else will know. Mm-hmm. On to book number 2, second favourite, penultimate favourite book of all time.
We've got there, and I'm so sorry, but I've got to do another Abercrombie book. And I wonder if people remember what my favourite Abercrombie book is. But it's got to be The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. This book has, I think, Abercrombie's most exciting POV, which has to be Bremer Dan Gorst. And in the spirit of Bremer Dan Gorst, I'm going to review this book in the highest pitch.
People who have not listened to the audiobook will have no idea what is going on.
So, Bremer Dan Gorst...
Just so you know, Ed's voice hasn't just broken.
No, and I know someone did say on the channel once that I sounded like David Beckham, but at least they didn't do a Deadpool and say I sound like David Beckham on helium. So that's fine.
It can always be worse.
It could be worse. Every cloud. So Joe Abercrombie, The Heroes, it follows... I mean, the main POV of this, but obviously Joe's approach is always multi-POV, multi-layered approach, is Bremer Dan Gorst, who is this soldier forgotten of fortune, and who has now been kind of clubbed down to an errand boy, really, to a messenger or a journalist, really, isn't
but he? First, other than just getting to Gorst, what would you say it's about overall? Because it's inspired by film.
It's inspired by
A Bridge Too Far.
A Bridge Too Far, exactly. So this book is the story of a battle at the place called the Heroes, which are several stones on a hilltop, essentially, and it's the story of a battle over 3 days, and you have POVs from both sides. So I love military fantasy, I love military fiction, so the way that Joe Abercrombie writes, I can tell he's a Total War fan, not by his Twitter, but by reading this book. You know that he's a Total War fan. But reading the war from both sides and the way that he's able to play with what people are thinking, what they're doing, seeing these characters in the battlefield, knowing some characters are going to come and then they don't, and all that kind of stuff is brilliant. And I think The Heroes is just so exciting from page 1 to the very final page. The plot is fantastic, the characters are brilliant, and the study of various characters, new characters and old, is just genius. And I love the way that Joe writes his standalones. I wish he would do more standalones in the First Law world. Hopefully a trilogy of standalones after the Age of Madness would be really cool.
What I will say is I'm not as much of a big fan of The Heroes as Ed, but this was the birth of Joe Abercrombie's iconic head jumping.
His casualties.
So he has basically invented this new perspective that quite a few authors have been using now, haven't they?
Yeah.
Where you follow a random character in a battle and you go until they die and you follow the person who killed them.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of cinematic visualization. And it is one of the best chapters I've ever read.
It's incredible the way that you can just cover so much different ground. Like you can get a lot of heart in there, you get a lot of character work and lore and world building and emotion just through head hopping like that in one chapter.
It's the greatest conveyor of the chaos of warfare.
It is exactly,
and
it
to
really
actually
reminds
feel
me
what casualties are. I think it gets lost in films and books. That obviously it's impossible for us to really imagine what it's like to be in that situation. But that's as close as I've ever got. Really, I felt the chaos in other books, but to feel the impact of deaths and casualties like that, because you start to get invested in this character, thinking you're going to follow them for a while.
All of a sudden, a mace has clapped their head in. Yeah,
gone.
Great.
Entire life over.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And it reminds me of like the first scene in The Revenant.
Oh, yeah.
Does it happen in... I think someone said it happens in Attack on Titan, but I don't know for sure.
I haven't watched it.
I can't remember now. But yeah, it's amazing. My second favourite fantasy book of all time. Sorry for all the tangents, but it's incredible. I love Joe's writing, and I always will.
Well, in my number 2, I've got a completely different author, and I have Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie.
Fun fact, before you get into this is actually Joe's favourite book that he's written, I believe, when he was doing his rereads of the First Law.
Wow.
And all of his standalones, he said that this was he thinks is his best book.
Well, me and Joe obviously just have similar taste.
But did you see Austin from Tutor Ramble, who read it and gave it 3.75? And he said if he was being mean, he would say this book is like a Clash of Kings but with no plot.
Austin, how could you do that to me?
Yeah.
How could you do it?
That is harsh words from Austin.
And that has broken my heart a little bit, but I'll have to fight through the tears
so Austin,
and talk about...
Austin, Texas has upset you, but it's okay.
I won't put him on my hit list. I can cope with people disagreeing with me.
He better enjoy the last
I can cope with it.
Austin,
I can cope with it.
You better like this, okay?
But anyway, Before They're Hanged, what I love about this is that I really adored book one, the blade itself. But Before They're Hanged, I love how the characters start to come together in your classic go for a quest fantasy. Yeah. But Joe Abercrombie, of course, is Jabbercrombie. And he just subverts your expectations left, right and centre. But this is also the Joe Abercrombie book, I think, with the most character growth. Some of my favourite characters, I think Jezzel is actually my favourite character of the First Law, which most people would say Glockter or Logan, don't they?
Yeah.
I think Jezzel for me, I love all three of those, but Jezzel for me is the standout.
They're always so entertaining.
They are, and every chapter of Jezzel, there's not a single moment that I thought that could be a little bit better, or that was a bit disappointing.
Brother Longfoot, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, he's actually more annoying than Tom Bombadil, which I didn't think of.
Well, that is true, because Tom Bombadil's not annoying, so of course.
What? You don't find Tom Bombadil annoying?
No.
Promise?
No, promise.
So when I run around and sing in rhyme, you get really annoyed at me.
Ed,
so thanks.
If you started
wearing yellow boots,
or if you started hacking into me like Gollum does, Frodo and Sam, you'd probably annoy me then. But Gollum doesn't annoy me when he's doing that. His character held in a very different light. Okay, fair enough. But Before They're Hanged, I just think that every single chapter. I'm going on tangents. But the ending, the battle, the first big battle, really, it is exceptional. I love the balance between all our characters. Colin West, his journey in this.
Furious,
brilliant. So I just love every single character in this. And I think it's Joe Abercrombie at his best, even though Austin doesn't agree with me. But anyway, that's my second favourite fantasy book of all time. And if you haven't, please do watch the interview Joe Abercrombie did over on Daniel Green's channel with Between Two Perns with Jackson.
So he is the best satirical author.
I think he is the Hugh Grant of the fantasy author world. You know how it's very self-deprecating humour, but pretending to be arrogant as well.
That's great.
So that's an absolutely fantastic interview. And just read more Abercrombie. That's the message of this video, basically.
Very nice.
Isn't it?
And now we are on to the very famous, the very many honourable mentions.
Well, not too many because we're doing 3 each, but we'll whiz through these a lot quicker. That's kind of our rule, that if they're honourable mentions, we can't talk about them for as long. So quick up,
Only 10 minutes each book.
We've got Return to Adan,
Yes,
the
this
third
is
book
on
of the
both
Adan trilogy
of
by
our honourable
Philip Chase, by Dr. Fancy himself. And as you said, Ed, this
Both
is an
of us.
honourable mention from both of us.
Both of us.
This is incredible fantasy. I love how it takes epic fantasy as a genre in a very different direction, but in a way that is still just so satisfying, is exceptional. Book 2 ends in a way where kind of your typical fantasy series would. So this feels very unique. But
Oh, well, I think book 2 ends as if it's a book 3.
that's what I'm saying. It ends in a way that your typical fantasy series would.
Oh, fantasy series. I apologise.
So
You're
that
speaking
means that
wonderfully. You carry on.
maybe I was just, speaking other languages, but that means that book 3 feels very unique and different, but I love the journey. And I also love the kind of like the feeling of like 2 different endings. Do you get what I mean?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
There's like 2 endings, and one kind of gives you all the kind of fancy trope juices that you love.
Yeah.
And the other one is just so heartfelt and so
No
true
juice.
to what Philip
No juice.
so true to what Philip Chase has created in this series, and it's magnificent.
Yeah, to me, Return to Adan is the best kind of melting pot of trad fantasy and contemporary fantasy mixed together.
Because obviously self-published has the freedom to do what it wants, and I think that is a wonderful freedom that Philip Chase made the most of.
Yeah, definitely. And traditional fantasy as well meets modern fantasy. It's got such a great balance of character, lore. I mean, it harks back to Tolkien. And when I read the first book of this series, it made me feel as if I was reading The Fellowship of the Ring for the first time again, which to me was very exciting. So I absolutely loved it. But Return to Adan, great character work, fantastic endings, characters that sometimes go in directions you think they're going to go, and then sometimes they go in directions completely south. And I love it for that as well. And it's a very emotional series. It feels like it was written for us as well. So and it's one of our BookTube kind of like most proud moments that we were able to read the first book
Before it's published.
before anyone else. And chat to Philip about it. So that was absolutely awesome.
What an honour.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chase. Loved it.
And then on to the next one we'll mention. That is, for me, The Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie.
No arguments there.
So this is an honourable mention. So your favourite of the first trilogy is Last Argument of Kings.
Yeah.
It's my second favourite. I love the way it concludes, and there's character moments that are the best in the entire series.
Probably second best duel in fantasy.
I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Number 1, maybe in a book I talk about a little bit later.
Spoiler.
But yeah, number 2, greatest duel of all time. Some of the twists and turns I love, and it's just another magnificent creation by Joe Abercrombie. And if you haven't guessed, the first Law original trilogy is amongst my top 3 trilogies or series of all time, as 2 of the installments are in this fantasy list.
Yeah.
But that's my second one.
And the second one for me is this beautiful edition of We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. So the bad guys won the war. Life is terrible.
Yeah.
And We Are the Dead is just Mike Shackle at his best. It's such a great book. It is a page-turning, grimdark book that asks a lot of questions and answers even less, I would say.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about why you should read this, I think head over to Talking Stories channel, where he talked about 5 reasons to read the Last War trilogy.
Yeah. Love John's
But
channel.
it far more eloquently than we could.
100%.
Or than I could.
So
So
I
I'm
better,
sure you
I better
could do
shut
it.
up because Will has no faith in me. But We Are the Dead it's such a unique fantasy.
Yep.
And the various characters it follows are trying to kind of piece together a resistance against the invaders. And it's just done in such a brilliant way. And it pulls no punches. This book, it goes out with a bang.
It does. My final honourable mention... Why can I not say that word? Honourable mention is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. Book 1 of The Burning. This is an ongoing series that I absolutely adore. I feel quite similar about book 1 and 2, but when I kind of think of kind of more the moments I remember, those iconic moments that jump out of my head, The Rage of Dragons does that, and maybe it's got a bit more sentimentality because of... This just took me by surprise how much I loved it.
It is good. I'd actually love to reread it, but when book 3 is coming out.
I think that might be next year.
Because this book is blowing up on TikTok.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Smitty recently read it and loved it, and he did even a great interview with Evan Winter.
Have you watched it?
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I love listening to Evan Winter talk.
Yeah.
whenever he's been on Daniel Green's channel, always tune in, because it's just, he's gonna say some
very
great
eloquent,
stuff.
very interesting,
really interesting. So I'd like to reread it, and maybe, hopefully when book 3 is coming out, then we shall do a reread.
Yeah, we probably will. And Tau is one of my favourite characters. Some people are a bit annoyed with him because he's all about vengeance. But in my mind, you know what? If I was in his situation, I'd probably be a bit kind of zoned in. What's it called? Tunnel visioned.
Yeah,
I'd be a bit like that as well.
On,
and also,
time to stab people.
Probably the best twist of how someone becomes amazing at something. You know how annoying that is in books. How people become incredible,
isn't it?
It's annoying how people become like amazing swordsmen in 3 months. That really annoys me.
He's the greatest fighter of all time.
The twist to make sure Tau can achieve what he needs to is, oh my god, magnificent. This true creativity.
That is why fantasy.
Genius.
It's just an example of why fantasy can be so cool.
The best, because it is everything in real life.
Yeah.
Plus more.
Yeah.
There we go. So that is the Rage of Dragons, my final honourable mention.
And the last honourable mention for me is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. I had to have Tolkien in there. And for me, I think the whole Rohirrim section of this book is just some of my favourite fantasy writing ever. The Court of Meduseld is just written so perfectly. And it might be my favourite chapter in any Tolkien book. Maybe after The Charge of the Rohirrim. So I just love The Two Towers. There are so many amazing scenes like that just define and shape fantasy in a modern setting.
Yeah.
And it is just incredible. Tolkien was a wonderful writer, and this has Erkenbrand in. So I'm going to leave.
I love Erkenbrand.
What a guy. I love Erkenbrand so much. So The Two Towers, amazing book, and the whole Rohirrim section, as I said, is just done perfectly. I mean, Theoden, I think, on a rewatch of the films, I think he's my favourite character after Frodo.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, but I would like to reread The Lord of the Rings again with kind of like a focus on Theoden.
Nice.
Just to see how it compares to the films.
I often like to think what would have happened if, Theoden had survived.
Oh,
things would have been very different.
He had aura, didn't he?
He did. That's it for a different video entirely. Ed, as I took over the honourable mentions, I think you should unveil your favourite book of all time first. So a quick little drum roll. I'm getting tired.
My favourite fantasy book of all time is The Shadow of the Gods by Papa Gwynne. Now, I know that I mentioned Malice in the last video.
How much is he paying you?
This time 75 because it's number one.
So pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, 75p per mention. So The Shadow of the Gods is one of my favourite Shadow of the Gods books because Shadow of the Gods is such an... Anyway.
£2.25. Nice.
Papa Gwynne, The Shadow of the Gods. This book, it feels like it was written... No offence, but for me.
It's true.
This is like everything that I ever wanted to read to do with Vikings. It's just done perfectly, but it's Vikings with giant animals, with giant gods, with trolls, with huge testicles.
Look,
which really wasn't
cover.
on my list of like must read in a fantasy. But after you see, after you read the pendulums that they are, you think, how can a fantasy book be written without huge testicles? I asked the question. And I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say. Are there any other fantasy books?
I didn't think this is what we're talking about today.
Troll testicles. But we have the character of Orca, aka John Wick. We have the character of Elva, who is aka young Orca, basically, isn't she? And then we have the character of Varg, who is, well, I will leave it there. But it's just an amazing book. To me, you have these... It's like The Witcher, if it was written really well. But like meets God of War. That's kind of how I would sum it up. It is the best of fantasy. The characters you really get behind. After rereading it as well in September, which was this month, at the beginning of September, I realised...
For the Brothers Gwynne read along?
Yes. I realised how impactful these characters are and how effectively they're written. Literally within like 2 paragraphs, you know exactly what kind of character Orca is. You know what drives her. And... you also know that there's an air of mystery around her that is unveiled as you read on. Mm-hmm. There are some shocking twists here. There are some really emotional, impactful moments. The fantasy is fantasying. It's giving amazing.
It's giving amazing.
So I love it. I mean, I love the whole Viking setting. It's basically Skyrim on steroids, isn't it? And I just absolutely adore it. So yeah, Shadow of the Gods, my favourite Papa Gwyn book. It's got amazing action, amazing characters, heartfelt moments, really funny characters, and there's actually a character who's based on me, and he loves cheese just as much as I do.
Put the pieces together there.
So,
or if you haven't read Shadow of the Gods, read it and find out.
Read it, but yeah, exactly. So
don't read it for the amazing books that you're going to cry at.
Read it
to find out who the cheese man is.
Read it, cheese man. Read it to find out about the cheese.
I've just got that song, the cheese tax going on in my head now. I won't sing any more of it.
Wow.
But it's basically just that.
I don't believe what you do sometimes.
Did you hear about the French factory that blew up? The French cheese factory.
What?
That's just debris everywhere.
Nice.
Can I have a drum roll, please, Ed? Oh, I have got another Papa Gwyn book. It is Ruin from the Faith and the Fallen. And no, this is not because I'm biased. It may be book one, a Papa Gwyn book may be number one on each of our lists, but I'm convinced this is just because of how extraordinary they are. Of course, we have got the extra level of sentimentality because, well, he is Papa Gwyn. Yeah. But also because we can immerse ourselves in the background and the construction of the series. So, of course, we love it more for that reason. But I'm convinced this would still be my number one ever. It's got the greatest duo of all time, and many people agree with that.
This book's so emotional.
And this is the book that is widely known to have ruined people at the end. I think that there was... I forgot who it was. I watched a video recently, and people said that they've never sobbed at an ending like this, and there are so many people agreeing. Yeah. They said there's never been an ending like this where
John Gwynne, send your therapy bill to Papa Gwyn.
Exactly.
I sent it to him, and he refused to pay it. So, but at least you can send it to him.
It actually makes Papa Gwyn very happy when people say they cried at his books, which is very strange.
Yeah,
because
tell him.
He's such a kind man, but when it comes to breaking our hearts in books,
he changes.
He's a Kadashim. He changes. Yeah. But yeah, Ruin. I love how this series obviously plays into a lot of those traditional fantasy tropes. Papa Gwyn, he said when he sat down for this, he thought, I'm going to write what I love to read. Yeah. And kind of taking all those influences. So, of course, you got that David Gemmell, Tolkien kind of vibe in here. But Ruin is where I'd say he's subverts expectations the most. There's incredible action sequences. I love the character moments. I love the reunions, betrayals, heartbreaks, heartfelt moments. And you've just got the slow moments amongst the sweeping action as well.
And it
has love, loss, and just everything in between. And a roller coaster, a whirlwind of emotion that's got everything from giants to crows to talking about cheese, stew, amazing castles, ambushes, as I said, duels, animal companions, romance, and friends. Yeah. At the heart of it.
And a bridge.
Okay, there's a lot more I can mention. It has trees.
To me, this book is... Well, usually people think The Faith and the Fallen, it's a very traditional fantasy book.
Yes.
And this book just undermines that completely. And also, like, yellow is so underused in fantasy.
It is.
I love a yellow book.
So do I.
That's all I'm going to say now.
I do. It's like, She Who Became the Sun. Really like that cover.
Yeah, exactly.
Cover. But yeah, that is our favourite fantasy reads of all time. Thank you so much for watching. I can't actually see how long this video's been on, but I imagine it's been pretty long. So thank you for sticking with us throughout this. We've been waffling, we've been raving and ranting about our favourite books of all time, our favourite fantasy reads ever. So thank you for staying with us. Let us know if any of yours are the same. And let us know what some of your favourite fantasy reads are as well. But as I said, thank you for sticking with the Brothers Gwynne. Hope to see you next time. Truth and courage.
Truth and courage, the Brothers Gwynne.